see a couple people sliding in, and I'm fully aware that I am between you guys in drinks, so I will go as quickly as I can, but we're going to have a little fun with this, because why not? I'm going to make this a little bit interactive, so really quickly I'll just talk about who I am, who are you talking to, why. So as she said, my name is Matt Wren. I'm the co-founder, chief technology officer of BUNDLAR. I always like to throw a fun little fact in there. I'm a foster dog dad. I have fostered 40 dogs in the last 3 years, so you can imagine what that's like, having a whole lot of different pets. What you see in some of the pictures there, though, ultimately, I'm not going to go through all my credentials. I've done a lot of technology. I've done a lot of edge technology. I've worked with a lot of enterprises. And one of the things, and kind of the reason I was asked to do a talk about this, is because scaling into an enterprise is a lot different from getting an initial sale. And being able to have a technology that's capable of scaling into an enterprise, there's a lot of things you have to think about. So I'm not going to talk much about me, and I'm not going to talk much about BUNDLAR. This is me. Happy to answer any questions later. I do want to talk briefly about BUNDLAR because at the end of the day, I am president of an augmented reality company that is scaling augmented reality into enterprises. We have Department of Defense contracts. We have large enterprise contracts with several customers. I'll mention a few of them. But at the end of the day, what BUNDLAR does is we have a platform that makes it very easy for anybody to publish augmented reality. The lights are a bit blinding, but I see at least one person in the audience who I know came to our booth today and published augmented reality for the first time. There were about 65 people that have done it so far since I left at about 4:30. So it's a very simple to use platform. It's really easy. But at the end of the day, behind the scenes is a full-scale enterprise content platform. There's a lot more behind the scenes besides just ease of use. So it's very useful for companies that want to immediately start getting value out of augmented reality. They don't want to spend $500,000 in a year doing their first prototype to see what they can do. But with that, my question is, who are you guys? Because I want to tailor what I'm going to say to who you are and provide as much value in this talk as I can. So, show of hands, how many of you are essentially have augmented reality technology? Okay, how many are hardware? Software? Platform? Cool. How many of you are enterprise? You're either like an innovator at your company or you're an executive sponsor of programs? Okay, what about the rest of you? I see two more guys. I haven't seen a hand go up, so I'm kind of curious what you guys do. All right, well with that, the main thing that I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to talk much about BUNDLAR other than to provide some examples of lovely experiences that we've had dealing with enterprise sales, is whether you're a hardware manufacturer, software manufacturer, if you're a platform, a consultant, or if you're an actual enterprise sponsor who's dealing with immersive technology and actually working with immersive technology companies or doing your own internal development, there's a lot of things that you have to deal with when it comes to scaling as opposed to building a prototype. You see the list of a lot of the things I'm going to talk about on the left, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading that slide. But these are all the things that you end up, or some of the things that you're going to end up dealing with. Because the whole problem is it's great once you get a sale from an enterprise. When we got that first sale that we had to Microsoft, it was a huge deal. And then you realize we're a 25-person company selling to Microsoft. Now what? So the first thing I'm going to do is a little bit of a disclaimer. Whether you are an enterprise sponsor or an innovator, the one thing I will say, just to be fair with people, is always be honest about what your actual capabilities are. Because we've run into this, and I'll go give some examples later in the slides, of we had that executive sponsor that we were selling technology to in a large enterprise, and they were making all sorts of, oh, this is going to be a big deal, it's going to be huge for you guys, it's great, but at the end of the day, they weren't the person who could actually deliver scaling across the enterprise. They could do a single project, maybe. Sometimes they couldn't even do that. But they were talking a big game when they were in the sales process. On the flip side of that, if you're a technology company and you're approaching giant enterprises or the government, you got to realize what you're getting yourself into. You do not want to bite off more than you can chew. I won't name a couple of companies. I did some research on this and looked up companies that have gone into large enterprises and failed and basically disappeared because they had a really bad experience selling into an enterprise. One of them was at Microsoft, though. Anyway, that said, just the one thing I will say that I found is a really good standard is just be honest. Like, understand your capabilities, make sure you're communicating that with your counterpart, and know what you can do. So the first big problem that we always run into, and this is a very common one, is when your qualified buyer really isn't qualified. They're not the decision maker. This happens all the time. And you'll notice throughout these slides, too, I'm going to talk and I'm going to break things up between government and commercial. There's some related experiences, but there's some that are definitely different. So For a government customer, when you get a sale, when you find your customer, particularly in the Department of Defense, you need to realize that in general, your customer is not the person that can actually purchase from you. They're the ones who are going to use the technology. They may not be the one that can actually make the buy. If you're dealing with the Department of Defense, you've got your customer, they're going to have to go to their program office. Getting above their program office, they might have to get to the executive officer. Beyond that, they're going to actually have to go through contracting, and there's a whole other series of rules there. If you're not selling to DoD and you're just selling to another government program, you've got the executive officer there that you have to go through, and you've got the budgeting there. You probably are going to have to deal with, and talk about ways to get around this, a competitive bidding process, or requirements like small business set-asides or 8A set-asides, which would be for minorities or other groups like that. These are all things you're going to have to deal with, so you want to be aware of them before you ever even start engaging, because you'll think you have a sale, and that sale might not come for another 18 months. With commercial customers, it's the same thing. You'll be talking to your customer. You should make sure that they are aware that they need to know, can they actually make this buying decision? Do they have the ability to allocate budget? Can they generate a PO? And again, we're talking about enterprise sales. We're not just talking about that first one. We're talking about scaling across the enterprise. Is the person you're talking to at that enterprise someone who can sell beyond their own division? Someone who can take a solution that they brought in and scale it across the company? Are they the right person to do that? Or if not, can they at least make those introductions? Because a lot of people can't. The next thing you have to think about is whether or not the technology you have is actually ready to scale. Because this is a huge problem. And I'll talk specifically to the hardware people right now, because frankly, logistics and shipping issues are demonstrating right now at a worldwide capacity how problematic they can be. If you have hardware, and you all of a sudden, actually, I'll throw one example here that has very little to do with, it's a personal experience of mine where I had a company call me just as a friend and say, hey, listen, we want to do this engagement at an event, but it's going to require us shipping out 1,200, at the time, Facebook Quests. And I said, sure, I'll make a phone call, see what I can do. And I called Facebook, this was just before the pandemic, and I said, hey, I want to order 1,200 Quests, and they laughed. They're like, no, we can't do that. This is Facebook. That's a huge company. Now, granted, the Quest 2 was relatively new at that point, but when you think about somebody calling and making a request like that, that's a huge sale that they just missed. The company was a large pharmaceutical company. They had the budget. I had a PO ready to buy it, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't ship. They missed out on that opportunity. So when you start talking about, like, okay, can you actually fulfill your supply chain? But beyond just can you actually supply the orders, are the logistics and the shipping there? Even if you have the actual equipment, can you get it shipped? If you can get that shipped, can you support the parts? Can you support the service? These are all things that you really need to consider, because trust me, once that enterprise makes that buy, those are things you're going to have to do. Beyond that, software as a service. Do you have the servers? Do you have the capability there? These are all the things, again, that you got to think about. And I'll jump through pretty quickly. The next thing is, even though you've got the technology or the capability, is your team ready? I'm not going to read the slide. Customer success team, that's part one. The people who are actually directly dealing with the customer, from the people who are your actual account managers to your project managers, just to the people who are answering support calls. Beyond that, the actual customer success process. And one of the biggest things I will point out here is communication. When something goes wrong, do you have the plans in place to communicate with your customers and all of the end users what went wrong and how you're going to resolve it? Because trust me, you don't want them coming to you telling you that something went wrong. That's always worse. The other big thing is financial systems. Do you have all the deals in place to go through an audit? Because a lot of large enterprises are going to require your financials to be audited. Something that, again, as a small business, at least, we didn't think about until it came up. Next thing is, what's the budget cycle? Can your customer buy out of cycle? That's a big one. If not, what is their fiscal year? How long does it take them to get budget approved for a big purchase? If they can buy out of cycle, is there another cycle that you have to deal with? Beyond that, on the government, and this is the one I will definitely ping on the government has annual budgets. If you're not on that annual budget, your best chance is to get into something that's called an unfunded project or unfunded priority, because they have a whole other cycle for that. Beyond that, you got to deal with the fact that, again, they're going to have competitive bidding processes a lot of the time. There's ways around that, though, and I'll explain that in a second. But even once you get beyond all the fiscal and financial products, you got to realize sometimes there's a product cycle, too. Okay, great, you got the budget in place, but the team's not there. So these are all things, again, that will come up in an enterprise sale. Office politics and, frankly, if you're dealing with government, political politics. This is a huge issue. We had one example right now, actually there's two examples I can think of where we had a sale, the sale was good, it was an unbelievably successful project that we did as a prototype and they were going to scale it across the organization, but the executive sponsor that we were engaged with frankly stepped on someone else's toes and made them look bad by being so successful, and that person killed the project just because they were made to look bad. It happens. Just be aware who the players are. This is a demonstrated financial success at a large enterprise, and they killed it just because somebody got their toes stepped on. On the government side, understand command hierarchies and command priorities. Is the C-suite behind the initiative? Because if they are, again, on the commercial side, C-suite, if they're behind it, chances are there's a better shot of getting it done. On the government side, if this is something that's stated in a budget document, you got a much better sell, much better, easier way to get it sold. Timing is another big one. This one is very specific to government. If you're selling to the DoD and you have an executive sponsor or you have a program sponsor who's ready to buy from you, how close are they to their revolution of getting rotated out of that role? We had a sale going with Shepherd Air Force Base. We had a guy that was going to basically do some maintenance training for pilots. Interface training, the command console. The actual aircraft console, the equipment, the instrument panel, they were going to do training on that. They engaged with us, but the problem was our guy rotated out 3 months before we were ready to actually engage on the project, and the project disappeared just because the guy rotated out. And then we had to go re-engage with them and find the new executive sponsor and go through it all over again. That's a long sales cycle for a small business. So it's important to understand, even on the commercial side, if you've got people that are looking for advancement or looking for move from one department to another, just be aware of that. Talk to your customer, understand it, because it's going to be important, especially if you are trying to go across the entire enterprise. Cybersecurity. I will not go into all the details here. You see a whole lot of lists. I know this presentation will be made available later, but these are just some of the requirements that you're going to have to deal with. Some of them are audits, and one of the ones I'll bring up all the time is accessibility. It's actually lower on the list there. I've got it at the back, about WCAG and 508 requirements. There's people who are trying to do web accessibility compliance to augmented reality, where it doesn't fit, where actually augmented reality can solve web accessibility issues. But they're still trying to understand that there's no standards here for AR yet or VR. Be aware that your customer may require you to get these audits. There's other ones too. We're an Amazon partner, and we just had to go through their foundational technical review in order to do that, which is kind of like a lightweight SOC 2. But just be aware that your customers might have their own audit process that they're going to throw you through, both on those compliance sides and on the financial sides too. If you're dealing with the government, you've got FedRAMP, authority to operate. Authority to operate basically means your capability, your technology can operate within their networks or on their systems. Certificate to field is basically like a continuous. If you're doing software and you're going to be continuously updating it, certificate to field is basically having an ATO that will also continuously update with your technology. You've got to have a way to run it through the process every time you do an update. With that, though, you've also got the standards, the CMMC, the NIST 800-171. These are the rules. They're published standards. It's actually not that hard to find the information. It's very hard to document the process of getting through compliance, which they will require you to do. And then we talk about controlled unclassified information, classified up to secret, which is IL6, secret and top secret. If you're going to be dealing with that data, that is not just a requirement on your technology. That is a requirement on your entire company and anybody who's going to interact with that customer data. You have to have IT processes, HR processes in place outside of just your tech stack. These are all things that, again, as a technology company, a lot of times you don't think about. And then I always have the IT department as a separate slide because all of the things that I just mentioned in the previous slides, all of those things exist at a sub-level within IT. Even if you have the compliance, does IT have the scheduled capability on their time to do the audit? Do they have the budget for this year to do the audit? Because if not, you're going to get held up there. Even if you know you can comply, can that company push it through their IT department? We had a large pharma company that wanted to move quickly with one of our solutions, and they got stuck by IT because IT just said, we don't have the manpower right now. Sorry, won't work. Can't get this project in place. Even though all of the requirements were met. In fact, all the requirements that the IT department put in place were met, but they still couldn't just prove it. So Just be aware that you need to have your customer, or make sure that your customer is working through their IT department to make sure that they have the capacity, again, before you start counting the dollars that are going to come in and counting on them. These are all things, again, as a small business, I bring this up, I brought it up at the beginning. If you are the executive sponsor of this type of stuff, be aware that if you are not watching this stuff, you have the potential to kill the small business that you're working with. And that's not an exaggeration. I've seen small businesses go under because this wasn't thought of. So how do you get around some of it? How do you accelerate it? So I don't know, how many of you are familiar with SBIR and STTR programs? I see one hand. Okay, Small Business Innovation Research. Almost every department in the US government, obviously the largest being Department of Defense, and within Department of Defense, probably the largest being Air Force. They have an open topic. If you have technology that you want to sell to the government, you can literally apply for a contract with the government. They will give you, I think it's $50,000 to $75,000 on a phase 1 open topic with AFWorks to find a customer. Now, it's a long contract process. You got to go through this whole 65-page proposal to do it. But they'll give you money just to go find a customer. And then once you find a customer, you get what's called a phase 2. And the phase 2 is to do your proof of concept. Bundle AR, we did a phase 1 last year. We have a phase 2 right now. We're applying for another phase 2. We're currently in talks with our phase 2 customer to go through the phase 3. The phase 3 is the first time that actual customer will have to pay for the technology. The first two sets of money came directly from AFWorks. I put their logo up specifically because that's probably one of the best programs to go through. They're the quickest, they're the easiest, and they're great. And they will, the other thing I'll bring up about STTR, by the way, is similar to SBIR, but you're doing research with an affiliated university. Similar program, they get published about the same time, but they are separated. So the university affiliated is separate from small business, and it is small business innovation research. It has to be, in some way, shape, or form, a research and development project. But the cool thing is, if you have a SBIR phase 1 or a SBIR phase 2, you are actually qualified. Anybody in the government, not just if we have a SBIR phase 1, we had a SBIR phase 1 from AFWorks, we currently have a SBIR phase 2 from AFWorks. Any department in the government can contract with Bundle AR right now, no competitive bidding required. The SBIR process is considered the competitive bidding process. That is a huge way to shortcut a lot of it. Now that said, most departments in the government don't know that. When you start talking to some of the contracting officers, they have no idea that they have that capability, so you actually have to educate them about it. Again, these are one of the shortcuts for government. On the commercial side, I've got a whole list of different organizations that exist in large enterprise organizations. They have venture groups within the organizations. They have innovation labs. These are all the people that you want to start engaging with. Now, the one thing I will say, anyone from large consulting companies, Accenture, Deloitte, EY, any of those guys? I will say that personally, we have not had a whole lot of good experiences with their innovation labs because they're not really the customer. They're looking for stuff that they can demonstrate to hope that they can find a market for it and maybe sell it out, but they're not actually going to pay you. They just want to show off your tech, maybe. That said, if you do engage with their customers that way, that's a real big pipeline to get a lot of sales quickly. University partnerships are another one. I brought this up with STTR, but getting to know your research company, your research organizations within your local universities, that gives you another pathway to STTR. And the reason I always bring up STTR is universities already know how to write grants. They already know how to write contracts. They take a lot of that burden off you to potentially get to some of that money. Hackathons, I'm not a big fan of, but I throw it up there because I know a lot of people do use them. And frankly, a lot of companies have startup programs. So Azure has the Startup Accelerator. AWS has a Startup Accelerator. I won't name all the other companies, but that's it. This is pretty much, like I said, whether you're an enterprise innovator, whether you are an executive sponsor, whether you're a small company or a large technology company trying to get across an enterprise, these are the things you're going to run into. Happy to talk. I've faced all of them. I've had bad experiences with every single one of them. We've lost money, we've lost projects, and frankly, we've gotten through them and we know what to look for now. But these are just some of the things. With that, if you'd like to talk about it or if you'd like to see what Bundle AR does, swing by our booth, 937. In the expo hall. We'd be happy to have any of you who have not yet published augmented reality yourself. You will do it in our booth in about 10 minutes. That's my personal information if anyone ever wants to contact me. I have my LinkedIn there. I have my email there. I'm happy to talk to you about that. I advise on entrepreneurship for a couple of universities in Chicago just because this is a problem. And with that, I know I got about 5 minutes left, so I'm happy to answer any questions about anything.
Any questions from the audience?
Otherwise, we can end early and you can all go get some drinks.
Happy hour starts at 5:30,
Is it?
which it is, what time is it now, 5:29? We've got 1 minute for a question.
I got 1 minute for questions.
Let's give a round of applause for Matthew. That was great. Thank you so much. Oh, we do have a question.
Where do you see the biggest opportunities and the biggest challenges to move the industry forward to scale?
For augmented reality?
Yeah.
Well, so that's frankly what BUNDLAR does is we address the biggest problem that we see. So frankly, augmented reality is hard. It's a very difficult technology. It's hard. And a lot of companies that are using it, government, they've identified that it's powerful and that it works, but it's hard to deploy, it's hard to deliver, it takes time, it's expensive. BUNDLAR is a web-based, no-code platform that makes it easy for anybody to publish augmented reality, but we're also a full-scale enterprise content platform, so we can do a lot of big stuff behind the scenes of that easy-to-use interface. We deploy to mobile devices, not because it's the ideal way to experience augmented reality, but because it's the hardware that everybody has. So if you're trying to get into an enterprise and show them how to demonstrate value today, using augmented reality very quickly, the trick is put the content creation in their hands, let them build a solution to a problem that they have existing right now, and deploy it in a day or a week or a month instead of 6 months from now and $500,000 later. And if they can do that, they start to see the value, then they want to do it more. One of our first engagements we had with Microsoft was augmenting I believe it was the safety protocols, the COVID protocols for an IT data center. But then they augmented the fire extinguisher and how to use that and the AED because he started playing with the platform and liked it. And then someone else saw that at Xbox and they started doing the training for the support people on the back of an Xbox and then consumer facing. So like it'll expand once people start to use it, but frankly, the biggest problem I see is just familiarization and making it easy and getting people using it. once they use it, they will see the value. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Matthew.